Hello again everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Derailious and today we're going to be going over a review of the greenhouse, including the good, the bad, and the ugly. Before we begin though, make sure to like and subscribe, use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order, or if you're picking up Hytale, and without any further ado, let's get started. So to begin here, there seems to be two major goals with the greenhouse update. The first was to make active farming a lot more enjoyable, and the second goal was to add passive farming as an alternative in the form of the greenhouse. First, I want to go over the active farming segments of the update, which I think the team did an incredible job on. First of all, we're going to go over the chip system. Chips are basically a combination of stuff that already exists, like attributes, as well as the heart of the mountain. I really love this system. It's very customizable, but you don't feel limited like you do with the Heart of the Mountain or the Heart of the Forest in the early game, and it's a lot more malleable than the attribute system. They could theoretically expand on this in the future, it'll be totally separate, but you still have to do a ton of different things all around your garden to level up these chips. I think the team did an incredible job on the system. The buffs are really strong, particularly this one, the Hypercharged chip. If you don't already have this maxed out, it is so good when handing in your pests. It is absolutely crazy. Next up, when it comes to the farming tools themselves, I actually have a lot of positive things to say. I really like this new leveling system. I do kind of wish they kept around everyone's old counter numbers so you could actually view them really easily, but that is the price that we have to pay for the new system. I think this is way better though. It's much more malleable once again, a lot more granular. You're able to get small individual increases every time you level up, and on top of that, it's not too bad to get the new overclocker items. They spawn at a decent rate for doing activities all over the garden. I don't feel like I get too many of them, but I don't feel like I don't have enough of them either. I feel like these are in the perfect balance right now. And I also wanted to give a special shout out to Crop Fever, which is an absolutely amazing ultimate enchant. Probably one of the best ultimate enchants that they've added, just because it feels so enjoyable to proc and get during a contest or when you're just farming. You get so much out of this. You get a ton of farming fortune, you get the bonus chances of huge amounts of crops, just like what we had before with the pumpkin and melon dicer, but now it's on pretty much everything, and it's expensive to craft, but not overly expensive to where it feels annoying. I am a huge fan of Crop Fever. Speaking about the new crops, I actually really like them. I think the sunflower and moonflower mechanics are super interesting, and I'm glad that they actually ended up adding a new collection for the sunflower, moonflower, and the wild roses. And on top of that, they also gave us a new minion, which is very nice to see. I'm also a big fan of the collections in general for everything within this update, except for the sundial, which I'll talk about more later. Pretty much everything else is totally fine in my view. There are some nice buffs here, some nice improvements. Things like, for example, the plot eraser are great to see added to the game, not too expensive. Obviously, we talked about Crop Fever already, but there's also the Sunlight and Moonlight crystals, as well as the new Reforges, which aren't the craziest, but I guess are okay. And on top of that, there's stuff like the Crow Pet, which is also nice to see. Something else I wanted to note here are the changes to the crop milestones, visitor milestones, and composter upgrades, many of which are way better now, I've got to say. I maxed out my sunflower milestone, and it didn't take too long at all. It was definitely in the fair range, I would say. In terms of my visitor milestones, I'm still going for them. It's totally fine. Same thing for the composter. These changes are much better than what we had before, and things feel a lot more fair, especially in terms of active farming. I think people really like this change. There's also a ton of new visitors alongside this update, one of which is the new Ludleth visitor who goes to the hub once you get them as a visitor and they sell you the Rose Dragon Egg. I'll talk more about the Rose Dragon Egg in a little while, but my initial view on it is that the pet is extremely good, although I think it would be a little better if it didn't require mutations, but rather required a ton of farming materials, but it's not the biggest deal in the world, at least personally to me. In terms of the rest of the visitors, I think that they're all great. I have no problems with pretty much any of them. The only ones that I believe are currently inaccessible or are supposed to be inaccessible are event-related ones, as well as the mayors. The main reason is because right now Aura is in office. Pretty certain that the mayor visitors will actually give you a new talisman line. I have heard about this, but I'm not 100% certain. I believe it gives you more votes in future elections. Regardless, I think all of the visitor changes here are fine and totally great. Next up, we got to spend a little while talking about the greenhouse, and I have quite a few opinions about it. My first opinion is that I'm not in the camp that I think things need to be sped up by a huge margin, because I don't believe that this update fundamentally is something that should be maxed out in just a week or two. You may be thinking to yourself, well, doesn't that go against your other opinions about stuff like hoppity, or how grinds are too long, or things like that? And the main reason I don't think this applies is because this grind is not active, which is the first thing, but also it's not really RNG dependent, or at least not significantly so. You can place down the crops in the right orientation, and eventually you will unlock every single mutation. It's not like hoppity, where you could sit there for hours and get nothing. It's not like many other grinds in Skyblock, where you're just doing it aimlessly, actively, and it's very high intensity. This is a low intensity activity that's supposed to take months, and it makes sense that it will take months. However, I still do have a few problems with it. The first is that the vast majority of the mutations are not really used at all, whether that be in recipes, whether that be in collections. They're just not very useful. Number two, I don't really love the current meta of going purely for ethereal vines by just spamming out gloom gourds. I'm going to do it because it's the most profitable right now. It's the best thing for me to do at the moment. But in terms of design, it's probably not the greatest system in the world. I personally don't mind it that much, but I would much prefer to actually go out there and unlock all the mutations. But I know that would be hugely inefficient unless I get all of the slots and all of the greenhouses unlocked first, which is what I'm going to do. I did want to spend a little bit of time going over my thoughts on ethereal vines specifically, because I've seen a lot of people in the community be upset over this, talk about this, and I feel like it's relevant. So to begin, I want to preface by saying that A, ethereal vines are the items that you need in order to unlock additional slots in your greenhouse, and B, I did not profit off of this at all. I was not one of the people who had a ton of ethereal vines day one. I did not know the gloom gourd method until a little bit too late. I bought vines too late. Everything about what I did lost me quite a bit of money, close to 1 billion coins at this point, but I'm not upset about that because that's Skyblock and that's how the economy runs. I will just make it back. I will just do whatever content I need to do. That's life. However, I do think there was a problem with ethereal vines, not from a player perspective, because it's obviously in the player's best interest to profit off of whatever update they have in front of them, but in terms of the design of ethereal vines in the first place. Vines are set up in such a way where you get more of them the more slots you have, but you need vines the most at the very early game when you don't have very many slots, which creates a situation in which players are grinding out vines in the early game at a very slow rate, and eventually, once they have 2 greenhouses down, they're able to get 30, 40, 50, 60 vines per day, or maybe even more. So, it's kind of an awkward situation as a whole. You're basically incentivized to only grind vines until you have all 3 greenhouses, and do basically nothing else, which I don't feel like is the healthiest for the greenhouse. What could the admins have done? They could have allowed vines to drop from getting unique mutations. They could have had them come from the crop analyzer occasionally. There could have been a billion other ways to implement ethereal vines, but the current implementation is still in the game, and at this point the price has fallen quite a bit for ethereal vines, so the money-making phase of this update is coming to an end very slowly as people continue to unlock more and more slots and place down more and more crops. I just wanted to give my thoughts, my 2 cents on it. I feel like it's entirely a design problem at that point. The admins have to know that players are going to act like this. They're going to try to maximize the amount of profit they were going to make, because of course they would. Why would they do anything else? So in the future, when designing systems like this, I think this is a great case study for the team to keep in mind. I'm not offended by the fact that people made a bunch of money once again, but I do also understand the perspective of if you're on the other side and you don't have a ton of money in game, and you're like, man, I have to sit here and grind like crazy or place down these, gloom gourds for the next 3 weeks. Well, some guy placed down that many gloom gourds day one and profited more than I ever will in Skyblock's lifespan. You know what I mean? I do understand both perspectives here. And I hope in the future when updates are designed, stuff like this is kept in mind a little bit because it really does create a crazy situation. My third and final problem with the greenhouse itself is that the things that you actually get out of it in terms of your collections and in terms of your recipes are two things that I don't think should be tied to the greenhouse at all. The first is the sundial, which you need in order to unlock crop speed settings for active farming. My question is, why is one of these items that's incredibly important for active farming locked behind the greenhouse? To me, that personally doesn't make a lot of sense, and I really do like the greenhouse. Secondly, there's the Rose Dragon. I think it would be okay if the Rose Dragon required a little bit from one area, a little bit from the other, but it's pretty much all in on the legendary mutations, which I imagine is to give the legendary mutations more of a purpose in the first place. But regardless, the Rose Dragon is the best pet for active farming. Once again, I'm not the biggest fan of tying together the active and passive farming like this because it really incentivizes you to unlock everything in the greenhouse first before you can actually get these new things that improve active farming, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense, but for now there's nothing really we can do about it. Also, what you're looking at on screen right now is the theoretically optimal placement for the amount of ethereal vines I have. If you want to see this information, I'll have a website linked down below. You're able to plug in how many different spots you have. You type in which mutations you want, how many of them you want, and you'll get a result. It's a very great website. I highly recommend it. There are also a couple other parts of the update I want to go over. The tutorial was fine, although I imagine that some people had difficulty comprehending how the plus shape system works for mutations. I really think something they could have done is they could have utilized what they already set up with the ethereal vine, where it shows you where the next spots you can place are. They could have done that in the tutorial to show you how things spread. I feel like that would have been way easier to understand, but it's okay, I suppose. Some other issues I wanted to bring up were the bugs. There were quite a few of them on release. They did patch out a lot of them very quickly, the biggest being that Jacob just was not working, which was a major issue for the first few days, but that has since been solved. There are still a few issues from my understanding, especially related to certain types of active farming maybe not being as rewarding as it should be, and also the greenhouse calculations being a little bit off. Hopefully those get resolved later in the week. They're not going to dampen my rating too much because the team has been proactive at trying to fix many of them, but there still are a few issues. Finally, in terms of things like the bestiaries for the new pests, I think they're totally fine. They drop some really nice stuff. The mantid claws are good. The fireflies in a bottle or fires in a bottle are great because you're able to upgrade your mouse traps, and the dragonfly drops are also nice in the form of the vermin vaporizer chip. I'm just a big fan of pretty much everything active farming related in this update. It's incredibly solid, and I even think the greenhouse is solid as a whole. There are some issues with it, but it's not devastatingly bad or anything like that, or offensive in my view. I think it's a totally fine addition to the game that maybe needs some additional improvements over the coming weeks and months. In terms of my final verdict, if you had told me just a few months ago that the team would be able to create an update that made me actively want to farm, I would not have believed you. But I truly and honestly believe the greenhouse update, and particularly the active farming part of the update, is probably a top 3 update this year, with only the foraging update and Diana V2 being better in my opinion. In terms of a rating, I would probably give this an 8, maybe an 8.5 out of 10. The only things dragging it down are the bugs, which initially at release I would have given it closer to a 7, but now since most of those have been fixed, it's sitting at around an 8. Would love to hear what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I think this is a solid update, and I highly recommend trying it out if you haven't already. Make sure to like and subscribe. Use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order, or on the Hytale store if you're picking up the game. And look to the future, fellas. I'll see you then.